So if you've never done a programming language before, this is a great excuse to actually try your hand at making a programming language. And you might get further than you think. Honestly, once you've made a few and you got that experience under your belt, then it starts to get easier and you really start to pick up momentum. So I hope people will start to get that experience. And if they actually come up with an idea that they really like, then I think that's awesome. Then they should take that idea and take it past the weekend and keep growing it and see what happens with it.
Hi there, and welcome to Context Free, where we talk about programming languages. Today, I want to talk about a fantastic programming language jam, or Lang Jam, that was organized by JT, who we just heard from. And JT was kind enough to speak with me both before and after the event, and I've taken excerpts from that conversation and included them in this video, along with some visuals I added. So, who is JT? Well, from a professional perspective, they have lots of experience in programming languages.
Let's see. I went to grad school for programming languages in 2010 and worked at Cray on Chapel and worked at Apple on LLVM and Clang. Kind of worked on the module system that would be part of Swift. And then, I joined Microsoft and helped them create TypeScript and then grow that over 3.5 years. And then, Mozilla for Rust. So I've kind of been around, but it's also been had a lot of lucky breaks to find my little positions here and there. And then just tried to get as much out of them as I could, as much learning as I could and be as beneficial as I could. And then kind of taking that, working on New Shell, which is my current project, it's been kind of a reawakening to how much I enjoy working on programming languages.
JT has also recently joined the Rust core team. For more information on how Rust is organized, you might also take a look at the interview I did previously with Ashley Williams. We'll also see some work from Steve Klabnik today. As for a programming language jam, since early on in my channel, I've been interested in such a thing. And last year, the company Replit did a language jam, although theirs lasted for 3 weeks. I was a little more interested in the idea of a compressed 2-day time frame, like many game jams do. So I was excited when I saw the language jam that JT was putting together. As an aside, I've also been interested in running a game jam for a WebAssembly fantasy console, with the idea that you could use several options for programming languages. I was considering having to make my own such console, but recently WASM 4 has been announced by Bruno Garcia, so hopefully there's an opportunity for a game jam with this in the future. But back to JT's Lang Jam, how did this get started?
Well, I was just walking around thinking, what else can we do other than game jams? So I threw out a tweet, I don't know, a month or two ago. I was like, does anyone want to try a Lang Jam, like a game jam? It seemed like people wanted to do it. I mean, I'm a big PL nerd. I love programming languages, and seeing that many people enthusiastic about making them, I was like, sure, why not? Let's see what happens. It's fun. I feel like people are starting to get a little bit hyped that it's this weekend, so it's good to see it. I'm also slightly intimidated because this is the first the first jam I've ever run. Some of it is just blissful ignorance, just jumping in and seeing what happens. Seeing what people create. I mean, there's definitely room for creativity in programming language. You could take a loose theme and interpret it any number of ways. So I'm hoping that some people do get a bit creative with the theme and stretch what the concept might be.
And about that theme, first class comments?
So this is a ludicrous idea. Anyone that comes from any formal programming training is going to say there's no such thing as a first class comment, which is absolutely true. It's ludicrous, but it totally would be unpredictable as a theme. And as it turns out, ended up making a whole bunch of really cool projects as a result. I didn't expect the level of creativity and ingenuity that people are putting into some of these projects.
So let's take a look at some of these projects. And of the ones I look at today, some are on JT's winners list, but I'm not showing all those winners. And I'm including others I found interesting that weren't on the official winner list. So make sure to go check out JT's video as well of the official winners. Some of those winners include Belle by the Amazing Q, and also Train, which calculates things by driving trains around tracks. In this case, the Fibonacci sequence. And I didn't do a survey of this, but it seemed to me like the Fibonacci sequence was the most common example program among all the projects submitted. And let's look at a text editor as well. Thinking of first-class comments, we can imagine assigning comments to variables, as in S notes here from Team ASRP. You can also reference those comments explicitly. Here we see the value of obj is void, but it includes a comment afterward, including concatenating these two comments together. Comment object, comma, more comment on this object. You can also just print the comment itself out. Down at the bottom here, when we print out a comment from a function call, we see this object is read with is passed to the printer appended to that. So what I got curious about is, does the comment follow this object value, or is it particular to this usage of it in this expression here? So let's try it out with another comment. Do they all get appended, or does another go with this object is read only? Skipping is passed to the printer. And we see in this case, they all get appended. And we see a different take on this in PlsExplain, which has special syntax for accessing the comment of a value. Here we're calculating factorial of 4, the factorial of the number of hours I've slept. And you get a default comment if you don't give an explicit one with your own meaning, the factorial of the number 4. But going back to the previous case, what are the comments attached to? The usage or the value being referenced? So let's give it another case here. We see here the factorial of another, but called again later, another no longer exists. It's just the factorial of the number of hours I've slept. I hope they've slept more since that time. And PlsExplain also is implemented with the Lark library with its own grammar language. Nicely syntax highlighted here because VS Code says, oh, it's a raw string. You might have wanted regular expressions for that. And some of the tokens and regular expressions also exist in the Lark grammar language. It's pretty cool. Before I get off of PlsExplain entirely, I want to take a look at the fact they included a REPL, a console, to interact directly. So I can say print hi, or I can say print hi with comment there. And hi itself gets a comment afterward, and print returns unit with a comment associated. Language RGL is a similar kind of notion that explains your computation as you go, but has a template language for inserting the values. So when it's not prime, you get what's it divisible by, including 9 being divisible by 3. And as far as the grammar of RGL itself, sort of cool. It's like a pre-concatenative language. So you say equals I2 to assign a value to I, or equals I plus I1 to assign I plus 1 to I. Also vaguely in the vein of attaching comments to values is team Dyniec, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which actually has no comments at all. Really, strings and comments have a lot in common. You could say strings sort of like are first-class comments. But in this case, they have no comments, and you just use an @ symbol to associate some comment or metadata with whatever value you have going. This function is used to calculate the sum of two numbers. Or you can attach any other kind of value or expression that you want. But going deeper down the rabbit hole, we have ln with team Dyniec, which lets the comments directly modify the AST of your source code. If we run this, we see the debug comments happen first. So we debug AST name or X, and then the code for this next statement or the return statement here, in which case these last two have already been modified. So here we set the initializer to whatever had been there plus 7. Then we change the name of the variable to z. So when you print z, we see the value 12. First class comments indeed. They definitely affect the code. And to look at the implementation here a bit, this one does parsing by using the PEG library that has macros to have a domain-specific language to define grammars inside of your Rust code. Though, being a macro doesn't look much like ordinary Rust. And they use pattern matching and algebraic data types for the interpreter as well. This makes a lot of sense when you're implementing in a language that has these features. And Rust borrowed these features from other previous languages. So, back to the Fibonacci sequence. I thought this language from Team Blue Blazon was pretty hilarious. You can give a comment with whatever natural language you want to use to describe things, and a footnote that tells you how it's actually implemented. You could do something similar with the C preprocessor and its non-hygienic macros, but I thought this was fun. And looking again at implementation, In this case, they used a custom lexer, or tokenizer. Although, with Python 3.10, pattern matching. I'm telling you, pattern matching is great for this stuff. Now, this language I thought was really fun. To me, one of the clear directions to go with first-class comments is literate programming, invented and or popularized by Donald Knuth, where you embed your program into a document. And so the README file from MarkSideways can be executed. Here we have a call to examplecode.init, which is a class defined by this header. And this is a constructor directly under it, which calls something else in its own code block. This.generateGreeting world print message. And generate greeting is defined here with this parameter defined and this code block. Let's take a look at it. And we find that if we change the name of this section, I've changed the name of that method. Something applies here. If I change the name of the parameter, also no good. So the document and the code are intertwined. Pretty cool. They also implemented Tetris using Pygame. You have to go see JT's video for a demo of that. And somewhat similar was Rundown, which also executes Markdown documents using goto rather than function calls. And it also prints out the content by default, which is great for text adventures, which have a soft spot in my heart. And another language I really enjoyed was Decor, because sometimes when I'm writing code, I find it awkward to have to define a function and then separately elsewhere use decorators or specialized comments to explain what I've said here, instead of being able to say everything I care about all in one place. Pros and cons to that, but it's something I thought about before. Here, they reduce the redundancy by getting rid of the function headers entirely. Everything is inside of these comments. The name of the function, the parameters and their types. Cut the redundancy, comments only. And then another direction you can go is with seemingly natural language. There were a lot of projects that included some kind of natural language look of one sort or another. This was a silly and a fun one called Polite C, which is the C programming language, but requires you to be polite, saying please and thank you in precise fashions before your program can work. Compilation is successful, but if you take out thank you, it's no good. And when it does work, it gives you an output executable that can be run. This one is implemented just by using regular expressions to search for certain things in the source code and looking up from there to see if the expected comment's in place. You don't have to get fancy. Depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Also, in terms of natural language, that train language allows you to discuss what the train looks like in the comments of the passengers. But perhaps one of my favorite languages that allows a certain measure of natural language was Space, with a Milky Way emoji for the extension and the directory name. So I'll copy and paste it here to get to the directory. And then I can run this and get a list of prime numbers up to 100. Now the cool thing here in this language, being named Space, is that you can have spaces in your identifiers. Let I, the potential divisor, equal 2. So in a sense, you've embedded your comment about your variable in the name of the variable itself. When you reference it, as long as it has a unique prefix, you don't need to give the rest of the name. Let k the potential prime equal 2. Or call isPrime, which really is prime checks whether a given number is prime. And here's our function parameter. So I can say, while k the potential prime is less than 100, and it still works. But k the potentate does not. And in the implementation, we see that whitespace is allowed in the tokenizer. So identifiers can include whitespace, although there's a check here to see if that first word is a keyword, in which case it doesn't keep processing the rest. And going a little bit further than space, we have Coqui, or however you pronounce it, where the idea is you just discuss in English or whatever language you want what you want to have happen, and then you mark it up to give additional meaning. Although there are some built-ins that are definitely in English, which we'll see in a minute. So here I've actually already modified what had said the sum of to say the summed up, just to show what this language can do. It even includes a standard library, which includes the sum function. Let's run this first. We see the fourth Fibonacci number is 3, and this passes it in and knows how to call this function from the text I gave on the command line. we're going through Fibonacci numbers, we see 1, 1, 2, 3, 5. So the fifth Fibonacci number should be 5. Working fine. Now if I go back to the original of the sum of, which is what it said previously, fixing the center library to what it should have said, returning it again, we do see that it can't find what was there and is actually processing the source code. If I change this to sum of, it goes back to working. And this language was implemented in OCaml, which has traditionally been a good language for language implementation. And here we see the definition of some of these primitives, such as is less than, which are core rather than being part of this lists library that was included. And here's another example I enjoyed, AUTOCOMF, which is a configuration language, including team member Troels Henriksen, who's the creator of Futhark, and I previously interviewed him on my channel. But this configuration language works for any other language that has one-line comments. And then it has templates with regular expression verification to replace values in here. And notice the use of Unicode for template slots in case, say, the language you're embedded inside of already uses $signs. So we run this here, we'll say, I want to change the host color from red to green. I want to change the user color from purple to orange. No, I already told you what was expected. Try again. Oh, right. I should check the regular expression. Let's change it to blue. And here we have blue and green now inside of our code. Here's also an example for a C header file. Another fun example I found was this Tom's Obvious Minimal Lisp language by Steve Klabnik. I told you we'd see some of his work today. He also live streamed some of his work on this, so you might check that out. So here we see a Lisp where instead of writing a parser at all, he just used an existing TOML configuration language parser. If you go check out my live stream where I played around with this jam as well, I also took advantage of an existing parser instead of making my own. But here we see a definition of a circle area function and then called with 5 plus 5. So 10 squared times pi gives us 314. Or if we replace this with just a radius of 1, we get an area of pi. And another browser-based example that I enjoyed is the language Pancake. It wouldn't technically need a browser, but that was the user interface given. Here we have dual worlds of uncommented and commented lines, which push and pop off a stack. So if we step, we get 1 push to the stack. 3 is commented, so it doesn't do anything. Then 2 and 3 get pushed, and we check if 2 is less than 3, which leaves 1 behind. Now flip if, we'll pop that value off. If true, or 1, then we flip which world we're in. Boom! And so now, the things that are uncommented don't count, and those things that are commented do. So 4 and 5 don't get pushed, but 2 does. And then we unconditionally flip back to our uncommented world. We add them together, and then we halt. I just thought this was fun. Then finally, let's look at a language here that does self-modifying code. And JT demos this one as well among the winners. There are other languages that also did self-modifying code. And here we see input and output from the comments themselves. In this case, implementing the game of life. So if we run this, it steps through one world step in the game. And we can keep running it and see it move along. So I thought this was really fun. This also included a web browser user interface, which you can see on JT's demo of the official winners. And on that video, again, you'll find some overlap with what I showed today and some things that are different. Go check it out after this video if you haven't seen it yet. So I also got curious what languages were used to implement the programming languages for the Lang Jam. Far and away, Rust was the most popular option. There may be some sampling bias in this, but still that was very interesting. And if you had TypeScript and JS together, they were next, with Python third. Depends on how you want to look at TypeScript versus JS. C++ and Haskell were next, followed by C, Ruby, Go, OCaml, and Scala. A number of other languages also were used. And for those who've never made a programming language before, what can you do to get started?
I actually started putting up videos on my YouTube channel to help people break out of like overthinking it. I think that if people don't end up over engineering and really fight to keep things simple. You can get a simple parser, a simple interpreter, and you can stand up a language in a few hours and then use the rest of the time to kind of iterate and bring an idea into it. I think you could get a fair amount done. One of the things that we learn in grad school is that you start with, say, the simply typed lambda calculus, and you inject a single feature into it, and that's a language. And then, okay, yeah, maybe you need to add a couple more types to it, a couple more values in the system to make it actually usable. Okay, that's fine, but at least you have the core idea implemented in some way, shape, or form.
So if you want to learn more about how to make your own programming language, one good place to look is the R Programming Languages subreddit. There's a community built around this. They also have their own Discord server. JT also put together links to resources as a file here inside the LangJam repo, including links to their own videos that they made in preparation for the LangJam. You might also consider taking a look at Bob Nystrom's fantastic Crafting Interpreters book. This is a common recommendation for a first reference today. It walks you through making a programming language from scratch. You can either reference it online or purchase a print or ebook. Or if you're into watching real-time software development, you might consider watching channels like Tim Morgan. He records the process of programming language implementation. But back to the jam itself.
I mean, it's one thing to like a tweet. It's another thing to put 48 hours of your life into something and try to make it work. But we had over 500 people join the Discord, 90 teams submitted projects. I mean, that's much higher than I would have. If you had just kind of pulled me aside and said, how many do you actually think are going to, okay, maybe a couple dozen, not 90. One of the Discord channels was called like Showcase, and people could showcase their projects. I was trying to ignore it, like, keep it red, make sure that there wasn't anything like too weird in there. But other than that, I tried to ignore it because I wanted to be surprised as I was going through and grading them and seeing how they worked. I mean, it is a bit of work, but I bet that if we had a small team, like breaking up the number of projects, but a single person, if I got more than, say, like 100, it would be like an astronomical amount of work. Yeah, I'm hoping that. So, yeah, we had contributors doing some infrastructure. I mean, it was as lightweight as possible. Everything goes through a GitHub repo. You send PRs. That's how you submit your project. All the grading is done by votes on GitHub. And then, for the people's choice, we just counted emoji, basically. But yeah, a lot of the getting the projects up there, getting the issues up there, tabulating, all that was using different kinds of scripts. So we had contributors contributing like JavaScript and Python scripts. I wrote some new shell scripts to just help do a lot of the churning part of the voting and whatnot.
And so there might be an opportunity to help out in the future to make the LangJam even better next time. And to find out when that might be, you might consider following JT on Twitter, or watching the repo, or visiting the LangJam Discord server. And speaking of the future,
I feel like the question on everyone's mind is, when is the next one? I think I get that question about every day now. I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, doing the jam is, a good week or two of solid work. You're dealing with the logistics of getting people checked in, making sure their teams, all the little details that you never think about until you actually try to do it. So I've got that in the back of my mind, but also, I mean, it's fun. I want to see another one roll out. Maybe it's like once a season, maybe it's like twice a year. I don't know, somewhere in that range, to actually have a cadence where people say, oh, when's the jam coming? Oh, it's coming in a few weeks. Let's sign up for that.
And I'm definitely looking forward to the next jam myself. Meanwhile, thanks much to JT for putting the jam together. And if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe. Bye, y'all.